Hey guys, tonight we're beginning something a little unusual, part story, part gentle teaching, all meant to help you settle down, let go of the noise in your mind, and drift towards sleep. They say if your voice is loud, a few people may hear you, but if your words are deep, the whole world listens. That's where we start tonight. Imagine yourself in a quiet room, the day already behind you, and now a story unfolds that's both simple and strangely powerful. And trust me, if you miss this one, your dreams might protest. You probably couldn't survive without it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And since I love knowing where these stories wander, drop a comment with your location and the time right now as you're listening. Somewhere out there, someone in another time zone is hearing this with you. And together it makes the world feel just a little smaller. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. There was once a young man, just 24 years old, with no parents left to guide him. His days were spent in quiet struggle, working for a wealthy merchant, returning to an empty home where he cooked for himself, ate in silence, and fell into bed alone. His life felt like a wheel turning without pause. Earn, eat, sleep, repeat. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the road in long golden shadows, he saw an old fakir trudging along the path. The man's back was bent, 3 heavy bundles strapped across his shoulders, his steps slow and unsteady. You could almost hear the creak of his bones, the way a tired chair groans under too much weight. He had been walking for hours, perhaps days, with no one at his side. At last, exhausted, he dropped down under a tree, the bundles still leaning heavily against him. From a distance, the young man approached, curious but cautious. The fakir lifted his eyes, and in them was both weariness and a spark of something unreadable, something between sorrow and wisdom. And that's where our story opens, with 2 strangers on a lonely road, one bent by the weight of years, the other by the weight of survival. Tonight, you'll follow their steps, but for now, just breathe slowly, noticing the air moving in and out, as if you too were pausing beneath that same quiet tree, a boy alone. The story continues with the soft hush of evening. Picture a young man, just 24 years old. No parents to guide him, no family waiting at the door. His home is small, his meals simple, and his days blur together like identical pages in a worn-out book. Work for the merchant, collect his pay, walk home with tired feet, cook in silence, eat alone, then collapse into bed. Over and over again. Life reduced to repetition. You can almost see him walking through a quiet town, street dust rising under his shoes, the same neighbors nodding politely without truly knowing him. His shoulders carry more than just the basket of groceries or the day's exhaustion. They carry the invisible weight of loneliness, the kind that presses against the chest at night when the house is too quiet. And yet, even in this solitude, the boy keeps moving. He does not stop to drown in self-pity. He cooks his own food, washes his own clothes, and maintains a routine as if discipline alone might protect him from despair. There is a quiet strength in that, the kind of resilience you don't notice in yourself until years later when someone else points it out. But resilience doesn't mean joy. His life feels hollow, like a song missing its chorus. He longs for something more. He doesn't even know what exactly. Companionship, purpose, a spark that might remind him he's alive, not just surviving. Now imagine him at night, lying awake on a thin mattress. The ceiling above him fades into shadows, and thoughts creep in. What's the point of all this? Is this it? Wake, work, sleep, repeat, until one day the body simply stops. These are the questions that keep him company when no one else does. Existential questions, the kind that visit most of us at some point in life. And in those moments, you might recognize yourself in him. Maybe you've had nights where the quiet felt too heavy, where you stared at the ceiling, wondering if you were meant for something more. It's not just his story, it's ours too. Yet stories have a way of turning when you least expect them. His monotonous path is about to collide with something unusual, something that will test not just his back and his legs, but his heart and his mind. Because sometimes life places a figure in our way, not to block us, but to invite us into a different kind of journey. As the young man continues walking that day, carrying the invisible weight of his ordinary life, he sees someone ahead, a bent figure with bundles strapped across his back, moving painfully slow. And in that moment, his own burdens suddenly feel lighter, because before him stands a man carrying far more than he can bear. The question is, what will he do when asked to share that burden? And that's where we step into the next part of the story, when the old fakir appears. The fakir appears. The road stretched long and quiet, the kind of path where the dust hangs in the air and the sound of footsteps echoes louder than you expect. The young man, caught in the rhythm of his lonely walk, lifted his head and noticed a figure moving ahead of him. At first, it looked like a shadow, slender and bent, hunched low against the weight of something unseen. As he drew closer, the shadow became a man. An old man, his back curved like a bow straining under years of hardship. Strapped across his shoulders were not one, not two, but 3 heavy bundles. Each bundle sagged with weight, tied in thick rope, pressing deep lines into the fabric of his worn clothes. His steps were slow, uneven, dragging slightly, as if every footfall was an argument between his will and his body. His breathing came shallow, the sound of age and exhaustion mingling with the wind. This was no ordinary traveler. This was someone clearly burdened far beyond what one person should carry. The young man slowed his pace, curiosity flickering in his eyes. In that moment, 2 very human instincts wrestled within him. One voice whispered, "Keep walking. It's not your problem. You've got enough of your own burdens." The other voice said, "Stop. Look closer." Sometimes the story of another person has the power to shape your own. The old fakir noticed him approaching. His face lifted, wrinkled with both fatigue and something else. A glimmer, a quiet spark, as if hidden behind the folds of age, was a secret only time could teach. He eased himself down beneath the shade of a roadside tree, setting the bundles against the trunk with a weary groan. He wiped his forehead with a trembling hand and then raised his gaze to meet the young man's. "Son," the fakir said softly, his voice low but clear. "Could you help me?" The words were simple, but they carried a weight heavier than the bundles themselves. Imagine hearing that request after a lifetime of loneliness. For the young man, used to silence and self-reliance, the plea cut through the monotony like a bell in an empty valley. He hesitated. His first thought was practical. Why me? Why now? Haven't I carried enough already in my own life? He could feel the quiet resistance building inside, the kind that comes whenever we are asked to give more than we planned. And yet, looking at the frail body in front of him, leaning against the tree, struggling even to breathe evenly, felt something soften. Compassion often starts as a whisper, doesn't it? A subtle nudge that says, "Go on, lend your strength." The fakir shifted slightly, his hands pressing into the ground for balance. "These loads are too much for me now. I have carried them farther than I should have. If you could take just one of them to the next village, I would reward you." Reward. The word landed with a small thud in the young man's mind. He wasn't a greedy boy, but he wasn't rich either. The thought of coins, even a small handful, stirred a flicker of temptation. Still, the stronger pull wasn't the promise of payment. It was the sight of the old man, frail and bent, alone on the road with no one else around. The young man finally nodded. "I can help you, sir. Tell me where you need to go." And with that, he bent down, tightened his grip, and lifted one of the bundles. Instantly, the weight pressed against his shoulders. It was heavier than he imagined, almost unnaturally so, as if the ropes held not just coins or goods, but the density of years themselves. His legs staggered for a moment, but then he steadied himself, straightened, and looked ahead. The fakir's face relaxed into a small smile, the kind of smile that says relief but also something else, something unreadable. "You are kind," he murmured, "and for that kindness I will not forget you." The road ahead stretched empty, lined with wild grass swaying in the evening wind. Together, the young man and the fakir began walking forward, their footsteps falling into an uneven rhythm. One steady, youthful, strong. The other fragile, dragging, but filled with quiet endurance. For the first time in what felt like forever, the young man wasn't walking alone. He had company. He had purpose. There was a strange comfort in that, even though his back ached beneath the crushing weight of the bundle. And here's where the story begins to stir inside us as listeners. Because we've all been there, haven't we? Standing at that crossroads where someone else's need meets our own reluctance, where compassion tugs at us and self-preservation resists. Tonight, as you listen, notice how it feels in your own chest. Would you have helped? Would you have kept walking? Take a deep breath now. Let it in, let it out. As you breathe, imagine yourself stepping beside them, down that empty road, into the story itself. And here's a little pause, an invitation. If a line or thought so far has resonated with you, if something stirred or made you reflect, share it in the comments. What part of this story feels most alive to you right now? The path is not done. In fact, this is only the first bundle, the first test. Because what happens next will not only weigh on the young man's shoulders, but also his heart. The bundles still waiting contain more than just metal. They contain temptation, doubt, and choices that could change everything. And as the evening deepens, we'll step with him further down the road, into the next burden offered. First burden offered. The air along the road had grown still, the kind of stillness that makes even small sounds stretch out. The young man shifted his shoulders under the weight of the bundle he had agreed to carry. Every step pressed the straps deeper into his muscles, but he pushed forward, telling himself that the road to the next village could not be too long. Beside him, the old fakir walked with lighter steps now, no longer crushed by 3 burdens, but still leaning on his staff as if habit kept him bent. After a while, the fakir's voice broke the silence. "Son, you carry it well," he said gently, "but I must tell you what you hold." The young man glanced sideways, curious. The fakir tapped the bundle with his cane. "Inside are copper coins. nothing more. Yet they are heavy because there are so many of them. The world values copper less than silver or gold, but the weight of abundance is its own challenge. The boy felt the truth of it, the bundle pressed like a wall against his back. He chuckled softly, trying to hide his effort. Copper or gold, heavy is heavy, he muttered. The fakir only smiled, a quiet smile that revealed no judgment. The road stretched on. Dust rose around their feet. Now and then a crow passed overhead, its caw echoing into the emptiness. The young man's mind wandered as the weight dug in. He thought about the promise the fakir had made, 3 golden coins in return for his help. 3 coins. Not enough to change a life, but enough to buy comfort for a little while. Enough to imagine something beyond boiled rice and lonely evenings. But then other thoughts slipped in, the kind that arrives uninvited. What if he kept the bundle? What if he walked away now, disappearing into the trees with a fortune in copper? His heart gave a quick leap at the idea, then immediately sank with shame. He shook his head, annoyed at himself. No, he thought, it's not mine. I only need to reach the village. That is all. The fakir, as if sensing his inner conflict, spoke again. Our burdens are not always what they seem. Sometimes the weight teaches us more than the reward. Sometimes the path itself is the treasure his words lingered, floating in the air like incense. The boy didn't answer. He kept walking, pressing forward, silent but listening. As the road bent away from the village and into quieter stretches, the young man noticed how empty the world around them had become. No farmers, no carts, no voices, just open land and the sound of their feet. The silence deepened his thoughts. He tried to picture himself reaching the village, handing over the bundle, taking the promised coins, and going home. It seemed simple. Yet something in the fakir's voice, something in his eyes, suggested there was more at play. And maybe you can feel that too, as you listen now. The way life often hides its lessons inside ordinary tasks. Helping someone carry their load might seem small, but sometimes it is the very moment your own story begins to change. Take a slow breath in and let it out. Notice how your own body feels as you imagine carrying that bundle. Heavy at first, but with each step your muscles adjust, your spirit steadies. That is what the boy was experiencing without fully knowing it. After a long while, the fakir said, "When we reach the river ahead, I will ask you again." You will see why the boy nodded, though he did not understand. His back ached, sweat trickled down his neck, but he kept his eyes on the horizon. The faint shimmer of water was already visible, cutting through the trees in the distance. Here we pause for just a moment. If you're listening and something in this story has touched you, maybe the reminder that even small burdens can feel enormous, maybe the thought that kindness often comes before reward, share it in the comments. Let others know what line or image spoke to you tonight. The young man's journey was only just beginning. The copper weighed on his body, but something else was stirring in his mind. The path ahead would bring new tests, heavier choices, and an invitation he could not yet imagine. And as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with streaks of orange and violet, the road led them toward the river. The next burden was waiting, heavy yet honest. The bundle pressed hard against the young man's shoulders, and with each step it seemed to grow heavier. His breath quickened, his back ached, and his legs trembled slightly under the strain. Yet he did not complain, not once. He kept his gaze forward, steady and determined, as though the act of carrying someone else's burden gave him a strength he hadn't known he possessed. The fakir walked beside him, lighter now with 2 bundles gone, yet slower, his age still showing in the way he leaned on his staff. Every so often he glanced at the boy, watching the sweat bead on his forehead, watching the stubborn silence with which he carried the load. There was approval in the old man's eyes, but there was also curiosity. The boy's thoughts churned with every step. This weight was not his own, and yet it felt oddly familiar. He remembered the long nights spent working alone, the endless chores, the silence of an empty home. Wasn't that also a kind of bundle? A weight he carried without reward, without relief? The difference now was simple. This burden belonged to another, and the act of carrying it gave his loneliness a new shape. It was no longer emptiness. It was purpose. As the road unfolded beneath his feet, he realized something else. He could have refused. He could have walked past the old man and avoided the pain in his back, the ache in his arms. But he hadn't. He had chosen to help, and even though the bundle was crushingly heavy, there was a small flame of pride warming him from within. Not the kind of pride that shouts, but the quiet kind that whispers, "You did the right thing." Still, temptation lurked like a shadow. He thought again of the copper coins hidden inside. He imagined them spilling out, glinting in the fading light. What might he buy? What might he change? The thought rose strong, then faded just as quickly as he remembered the fakir's tired face, the frail voice asking for help. His conscience anchored him, kept him walking straight even when his imagination tried to wander. The fakir spoke at last, his tone soft but steady. "Not many would do what you are doing. To carry another's burden without complaint is no small act. And yet, the weight is not just on your shoulders, is it? It is also in your mind." The boy looked at him, startled. How could the old man know? How could he sense the battle between duty and desire happening inside? But the fakir only smiled faintly and kept walking, as if the answer didn't need words. The path grew quieter, the sounds of the world fading until it felt as though the 2 of them were the only souls alive. The young man's breath became the rhythm of the journey. Inhale, exhale, step, step. Each repetition carried him closer, not just to the next village, but to something deeper, something he could not name. And perhaps you feel that rhythm too, as you listen now. The steady cycle of breath in your body, the way the mind settles when you allow it. Carrying weight is never easy, whether it's a physical burden or the invisible load of your own worries. Yet when you choose honesty, when you choose to do what feels right, even heavy burdens can bring a strange kind of peace. Pause with me here. Take a long inhale, let your shoulders lift. Then exhale slowly, letting them fall. Imagine setting down your own bundle for just a moment, letting the strain ease away. You can pick it back up later, but for now, notice the quiet in your chest. The young man walked on, holding tight to that same quiet honesty. The fakir said nothing more, allowing silence to be its own teacher. And in that silence, the boy realized something. It wasn't the promise of golden coins that kept him moving, but the simple fact that he had given his word. To break it would be to break himself. Still, as the road curved and the air grew damp with the scent of water, he felt a flicker of curiosity. What would happen when they reached the river? The fakir had hinted at another request, another test. His shoulders already screamed with pain, and yet he found himself wondering what more he might be asked to carry. The bundle was heavy, but his heart was steady. He had chosen honesty, and for now, That was enough. But the story wasn't done. Just beyond the bend, the river shimmered under the late sun, wide and restless, and with the river came the next burden, the second test that would weigh not only on his back, but on his very soul. The lonely road. The sky had begun to dim, the kind of soft twilight that paints everything in shades of grey and gold. The young man and the fakir walked side by side, their shadows stretching long behind them, weaving together on the road. The weight of the bundle still dug into the boy's shoulders, but his body had begun to adjust. Muscles burned, yes, but his stride had grown steadier, his breath more controlled. Sometimes the body learns to bear what at first feels unbearable. Yet what pressed heavier than the copper coins was the silence. The road had become utterly empty. No villagers passed with carts, no travelers crossed their path. The fields on either side stretched wide and barren, and even the birds seemed to have disappeared. The air was still, the kind of stillness that makes the mind louder than the world. The boy felt it creeping in. Thoughts he had pushed aside earlier now began to stir again. What if he left the fakir behind? What if he took the bundle and disappeared into the emptiness of this lonely road? No one would know. No one would stop him. A fortune in copper could change his life. He shook his head quickly, almost angrily. No, he muttered under his breath. That's not who I am. But even as he said it, the thought lingered, like a shadow that doesn't vanish just because you turn away. The fakir's promise of gold for his help whispered like a sweet temptation, but deeper still was the darker whisper. Why wait for a reward when you could take it all now? The old fakir kept walking, his cane tapping lightly against the earth, his face calm, unreadable. The boy wondered if the man could sense his thoughts, if he knew the battle being fought silently on this empty stretch of road. There was something unsettling about his stillness, as if the fakir wasn't just watching the path, but watching the boy's very soul. The emptiness of the road made everything sharper. The ache in his body, the temptation in his mind, the echo of his own doubts. It was no longer just a physical journey. It was becoming a test of who he was when no one else was watching. And isn't that always where character reveals itself? Not in front of crowds, but in the hidden moments, in the lonely stretches of life where no eyes judge you but your own. The boy tightened his grip on the bundle, as though holding it firmer might steady his thoughts. He tried to focus on the sound of his breath, on the rhythm of his steps. Inhale, exhale, one foot, then the other. A meditation of motion. Slowly, his mind quieted, not gone, but softened enough to keep walking. And maybe you can try that now as you listen. Let your own breath become the road. Inhale, feel your chest rise. Exhale, let it fall. Imagine yourself on that lonely road, the silence stretching wide, but instead of fear, let the quiet become peace. For a moment, let it be enough. The fakir finally spoke, his voice low, almost blending with the evening air. Lonely roads reveal what the crowded streets hide, he said. When there is no one to impress, no one to fear, we see ourselves clearly. The boy glanced at him, startled again by how perfectly the words matched his private thoughts. He wanted to ask how the old man knew, but he stayed silent. Some questions don't need answers. Some answers are already walking beside you. They pressed on, the sun slipping lower, the shadows deepening. The road ahead seemed endless, a ribbon of dust and fading light. The boy's doubts had not vanished, but he carried them the way he carried the bundle heavy, yes, but still moving forward. And then, through the stillness, the sound of running water reached his ears. The river was near. Relief stirred in him, but so did apprehension. He remembered the fakir's earlier words. "When we reach the river, I will ask you again." Ask what? For more help? For more weight? His body was already weary, his mind stretched thin. What more could the old man possibly want? Yet some part of him already knew. The road had tested his strength and his honesty. The river, he suspected, would test something else. Before the next trial unfolds, let me pause here and invite you, if this part of the story has echoed in your own life, share it in the comments. Have you ever walked your own lonely road, where only you knew the choices you were making? Sometimes sharing that reflection helps another listener feel less alone on their own path. The boy listened to the water ahead, his steps quickening despite the weight. The lonely road was ending, but another challenge was waiting at the river's edge. And with it, another burden to decide whether he would carry. Second burden revealed. The river came into view at last, glimmering under the dimming sky. Its surface caught the colors of the setting sun, orange melting into violet, ripples flashing with fading light. The boy exhaled, relieved to see the end of this stretch of road. But as he drew closer, the relief faded. The water was wider than he expected, deeper, its current restless. Crossing it with even one bundle would be difficult. Crossing it with more was nearly impossible. The fakir stopped at the edge of the bank, his cane pressed into the damp earth, his thin chest rising and falling with effort. He looked at the boy, then at the water, then back again. There was a long silence, the kind that makes your heart anticipate words you don't want to hear. At last, the old man spoke. "Son," he said gently, "you've carried one burden well. But the river does not care for age, and my strength is nearly gone. I cannot carry the others across. Will you take another bundle for me?" The boy stared, his stomach tightening. Another bundle. His shoulders already burned with the first. His legs trembled just from the thought. He wanted to say no, to shake his head and insist he'd done enough. Yet the fakir's eyes held him still, tired eyes, pleading, yet steady with a strange confidence. The boy's voice came out softer than he expected. "What's in the second bundle?" The fakir's mouth curved in the faintest smile. "Silver," he said. "Coins of silver. They are heavier than copper, but they shine brighter." The boy swallowed. Silver. The word rang in his mind like a bell. He imagined the cool gleam of it, the weight of wealth so close to his grasp. His chest tightened with a different kind of pressure now, not just the burden on his back, but the burden of temptation growing in his thoughts. The fakir went on, his tone calm. "If you help me with this too, I will give you 3 more gold coins. But remember, son, gold can be lost. The act of carrying is what remains." The boy almost laughed at the riddle. What use were riddles when his body screamed with pain? And yet, beneath his frustration, he felt the flicker of something else. Respect. Respect for the old man's composure, for the way he spoke as though the journey itself were more valuable than all the metal in the bundles. He hesitated. He thought of his loneliness, his small meals, his narrow life. Silver could change everything, but then, almost as quickly, he shook his head at himself. The silver wasn't his. It wasn't meant to be. He had only been asked to carry, not to claim. At last, he nodded slowly. "Give it to me," he said. The fakir's smile deepened just a fraction, as though he had expected this answer all along. With surprising strength, he lifted the second bundle and placed it onto the boy's other shoulder. The boy staggered under the sudden weight, his knees nearly buckling, but he held on. His chest heaved, his arms tightened around the ropes, and somehow he found his balance again. The fakir tapped his cane once against the ground. "Good," he said. "Now, let us see if you can cross." The boy looked at the water. It churned and shimmered, a moving mirror that reflected both the fading sky and the unease inside him. He stepped in, cold seizing his legs, the bundles dragging at his shoulders. Each step felt like a test, the current tugging, the weight threatening to pull him under. But he pressed forward, gritting his teeth, focusing only on the far bank. The fakir followed behind, slower but strangely serene. His cane steady even as the water lapped at his knees. Together they moved across, and with effort, with strain, they reached the other side. The boy collapsed for a moment onto the damp ground, his chest heaving, his body screaming for rest. The fakir set his hand lightly on the boy's shoulder. "You have strength, yes," he said softly, "but greater than strength is the choice to use it for more than yourself." The boy closed his eyes, his thoughts a storm. Strength, choice, silver, copper, gold. Each word tangled with the next, each heavier than the bundles themselves. He wanted to believe he was only helping, but part of him, the quiet part he did not want to name, was beginning to wonder. What if he didn't stop at helping? What if he took what he carried? And maybe you felt that too, listening now. The way a good deed sometimes awakens the shadow of selfishness, how temptation hides behind even our noblest choices. It's human. It's real. What matters is what we do with that whisper when it comes. Take a slow breath with me. Inhale deeply. Let your chest rise. Hold it for a moment. Then exhale, releasing the tension, releasing the weight. Let yourself feel lighter, even if just for a breath. The boy opened his eyes. The road stretched ahead again, quiet and empty. He had carried 2 bundles, but the journey was not done. The fakir still had 1 more, and deep down, the boy already knew the 3rd burden would test him more than the first 2 combined. Doubts. Whisper. The night pressed closer as they left the river behind. The young man's clothes clung to his body, heavy with water, his shoulders screaming beneath the double load of copper and silver. Each step felt like climbing a hill, though the road stretched flat before him. His breath came sharp, ragged, as sweat and river water mixed on his skin. Yet the fakir moved more lightly now, freed of 2 burdens, his cane tapping steady against the earth. Silence grew thick between them, a silence that was no longer peaceful but restless. The boy's mind churned as if it too had been stirred by the current of the river. He thought of the fakir's words, the riddles about burdens and choices. He thought of the coins promised, gold in exchange for his strength, but most of all, he thought of the weight pressing into his bones. That's when the whispers began. Not from the old man beside him, but from within. Why carry what isn't yours? Why break your back for promises when you could have everything now? He tried to push the thoughts aside, shaking his head as though to scatter them into the air. But they returned, persistent, sliding back into the cracks of his mind. The copper, the silver, together they were enough to buy a new life. A shop, perhaps. A warm home. Companionship. He imagined walking away from the fakir, disappearing down some side path, starting over as a man of means. The image glowed bright in his imagination, brighter than the fading light around him, and yet Another voice whispered too, a quieter one, harder to hear. "This is not yours. You gave your word. To take what isn't yours is to take away who you are." The boy clenched his jaw, his chest tightened. It was as though two versions of himself walked side by side now, the honest helper and the greedy thief. And he did not know which one would reach the village first. The fakir said nothing. He did not need to. His silence seemed to echo louder than words, as though he could hear the storm inside the boy's head. Every time the boy glanced at him, the old man's calm presence was a mirror, reflecting back his own unrest. The boy stumbled for a moment, knees buckling beneath the weight. He cursed under his breath, then quickly caught himself, ashamed. He straightened, forcing his stride steady again, but inside, shame and desire wrestled. He wanted to be good, truly, but he also wanted more. Isn't that the battle we all know? The pull between who we hope to be and what we secretly crave? Pause here with me. Breathe in. Notice the thoughts drifting through your own mind. Not all of them are noble, not all of them are kind, but here's the truth. Having the thought is not the same as becoming the thought. You are not every whisper your mind produces. The boy tried to remind himself of that, though he had never heard it said so clearly. He repeated it silently. This is not me. This is not me, as if repetition might protect him. But repetition didn't erase the hunger blooming in his chest. The road stretched on, darker now, the moon beginning to rise. The sound of insects filled the still air, a steady hum that only made the boy's thoughts seem louder. His shoulders sagged, his back screamed, his legs trembled. Each moment made the temptation grow. He looked ahead, searching for the outline of the village, for some sign that this trial would end. But there was nothing yet, only shadows and road. He tightened his grip on the ropes and kept moving, one step at a time. Inside, the whispers did not stop. They promised freedom, wealth, a life of ease. But woven into them was something sharper fear. Fear that he would never escape the cycle of work and loneliness if he didn't seize this chance. Fear that this old fakir might never give him what was promised. Fear that honesty might leave him with nothing. The boy's heart thudded faster, not from exertion alone, but from the weight of these thoughts. He wondered, was he strong enough to carry not only the bundles, but his own restless mind? And you, listening now, may feel the echo of that question. Because in quiet moments of your own life, haven't you heard those whispers too? Doubts about whether honesty is enough, whether patience will ever pay off, whether the hard road is worth it. Take another breath with me now. Inhale slowly, let it fill you. Hold, then exhale, letting the doubt fall away, even if only for a moment. Notice how much lighter you feel when the whisper loses its grip. The boy did not yet know the answer. He only knew the road was not done. The fakir still walked beside him, and one bundle remained unopened. And as they moved deeper into the night, the promise of that final burden, gold-weighted like a spark on the horizon, ready to test him in ways he could barely imagine, crossing the river. The river stretched wide before them, restless under the fading glow of dusk. Its surface rippled with a steady pull, reflecting streaks of silver moonlight. The boy paused at the edge, the weight of two bundles pressing his body down, his legs trembling from both effort and doubt. The fakir stood beside him, his cane sinking slightly into the soft mud, his expression calm as though the water posed no challenge at all. The boy stared at the current. It wasn't shallow, as he had hoped. The water ran swift, dark in the middle, carrying branches and leaves downstream with ease. His heart sank. To step into that river meant risking not just the weight on his back, but his own balance, his life. His mind screamed at him to say no, to set down the bundles, to walk away, but his word bound him. And so he inhaled deeply, braced himself, and stepped forward. The cold struck immediately, biting into his skin, shocking his body awake. The bundles shifted as the water rose, dragging him slightly sideways. He dug his heels into the rocky bottom, leaning forward, each step a battle against the current. His arms clenched around the ropes, shoulders on fire, chest tight with effort. Behind him, the fakir entered slowly, his steps unhurried, as if the river bent to his will instead of fighting it. The boy's breath came harsh, his heart pounding in his ears. He willed his legs to keep moving. Every step felt like 3. The water swirled higher, pressing at his chest, threatening to sweep him off his feet. He gritted his teeth and pushed forward, focusing on the opposite bank glimmering in the dim light. Halfway across, panic surged. The weight of the copper and silver seemed unbearable now, pulling him down, making the water rise higher around his shoulders. His vision blurred with fear. For one desperate second, he thought of letting the bundles slip, of saving himself alone. The idea struck hot and fast dropped them, live. But almost as quickly came another thought, quiet yet firm. You gave your word. The fakir's voice rose over the water, steady, calm. Do not let fear decide for you. Step by step, son. Just step by step. The boy clung to the words. He forced his legs to move again, each motion carving forward through resistance. Inhale, exhale, step, step. The rhythm became survival. Slowly, painfully, the water began to lower as the bank approached. His feet touched firmer ground, and with one last surge, he stumbled out of the river, collapsing onto the shore. He lay there, chest heaving, bundles still clutched to him like lifelines. Water dripped from his clothes, pooling in the dirt. His body screamed for rest, yet inside him there was a strange spark, a small flame of pride. He had not given up. He had not let go. The fakir reached the bank moments later, tapping his cane against the stones as he emerged. He looked at the boy with a faint smile. You see, he said, the river only asks for persistence, not perfection. Fear whispers loudly, but it cannot drown a steady heart. The boy wanted to respond, to say he had nearly failed, that the fear had almost won, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he simply nodded, his body too tired to speak. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of the sound of water rushing behind them, of their breaths mingling in the night air, of the lesson settling quietly into the boy's bones. He had crossed not only a river, but a line inside himself, and maybe as you listen, you feel a reflection of that crossing too. How often do we face rivers in our own lives, obstacles that seem too wide, too strong, too heavy? The fear tells us to drop everything, to give up, to retreat. But if we listen to the quieter voice, the one that says step by step, sometimes we find ourselves on the other side, stronger than before. Take a moment now. Inhale slowly, hold it, then exhale fully. Imagine your own river. Imagine yourself walking through it, steady, determined, reaching the far shore. Notice how the fear loses its grip when you decide to keep moving. The boy rose unsteadily, shifting the bundles again across his sore shoulders. His body felt broken, yet something in him stood taller. He glanced at the fakir, who leaned calmly on his cane, eyes unreadable. And in that gaze, the boy sensed another test waiting. The river had been only the beginning. The road ahead led upward now, into hills shadowed by moonlight. And with those hills, another request would come. One final burden heavier than all the rest. The mountain ahead. The boy's body ached with every movement, his clothes clinging wet and heavy, his shoulders raw where the ropes had cut into his skin. Still, he adjusted the bundles, copper on one side, silver on the other, and forced himself to keep walking. The river was behind them, its roar fading into the night, but the road ahead was no easier. It began to climb, gently at first, then more sharply, leading toward the dark outline of a mountain rising against the starlit sky. He stared upward, his heart sinking. His legs trembled already, his back screamed, and yet the road demanded more. The mountain loomed like a silent challenge, daring him to try. The air thinned as they climbed, every step pulling harder at his lungs. His boots scraped against loose stones, slipping on the incline. The bundles dragged him backward, threatening to topple him with each misstep. The fakir followed slowly, leaning heavier on his cane now, pausing often to catch his breath. At one point he stopped altogether, turning to the boy with eyes that glimmered strangely in the moonlight. "Son," he said, his voice low but steady, "I cannot climb further with what remains. My knees are weak. My bones ache. If you take the last bundle, I will give you 3 more gold coins. But listen carefully. Do not drop it, and do not let it open. The contents must be kept safe." The boy froze. Another bundle. His shoulders sagged under the thought alone. He wanted to shout no, to demand that the old man carry at least part of his own burden, but the words stuck in his throat when the fakir continued. "This last bundle," he said, almost in a whisper, "holds gold." Gold. The word lit up in the boy's mind like fire. His pulse quickened, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. Gold was not copper, not silver. Gold meant freedom. Gold meant wealth beyond his small meals and lonely nights. His imagination raced new clothes, a larger home, respect from those who had ignored him, comfort he had never known. For a moment, the mountain seemed less threatening, his pain less sharp. Yet another feeling stirred inside him too. Distrust. If the fakir truly carried gold, why walk alone? Why risk rivers and mountains with treasures strapped to his back? The thought coiled tighter in his mind. Was this man a merchant hiding his riches? Or worse, a thief disguising himself as a holy wanderer? If so, what harm would there be in taking from him? After all, wasn't it just stealing from a thief? The boy's thoughts tangled into knots. Desire pulled one way, suspicion another, and yet beneath it all, a quieter voice urged caution. You gave your word. Remember your word. But the whisper of honesty was almost drowned out by the roar of temptation. Finally, almost without realizing it, he extended his arms. The fakir smiled faintly, as though he had been waiting, and lifted the last bundle onto the boy's back. The weight crashed down, heavier than the others, pressing him toward the ground. His knees bent, his breath caught, his vision swam for a moment. But then he straightened, wobbling but unbroken. All 3 bundles were his, now copper, silver, gold. The fakir walked beside him with nothing but his cane, free at last of every burden. The climb grew harsher. Stones slid under his feet, the incline biting into his calves. Sweat mixed with river water, streaming down his face. His arms ached, his chest burned, his shoulders felt carved into by the ropes. Every step was agony, yet every thought of gold gave him a strange, reckless energy. He stumbled forward, driven not by duty now, but by hunger. The fakir said nothing more, his silence unnerving. He climbed slowly, watching the boy, his expression unreadable. The boy avoided his gaze, afraid of what it might reveal. Afraid the old man could see straight into the restless fire inside him, and perhaps, as you listen, you know that fire too. The way desire can disguise itself as strength, giving us bursts of energy when our bodies should collapse. The way greed makes burdens feel lighter, not because they are, but because the mind is blinded by want. Pause here with me. Inhale slowly. Let the air fill you. Exhale fully, releasing the tension you didn't know you were carrying. Notice how heavy the body can feel when the mind clings to what it doesn't yet have. Notice, too, how much lighter it feels when you simply breathe and let the thought pass. The boy did not know this yet. He pressed on, his body breaking but his thoughts louder than his pain. He imagined what he could do with the gold. He imagined running ahead, faster than the fakir could follow, disappearing into the night. The mountain seemed less a trial and more an opportunity. The road twisted upward, shadows deepening, stones rolling loose under his boots. Each step carried him closer, not just to the top of the mountain, but to a decision that would change everything. The mountain was steep, yes, but the steeper climb was inside him. And soon, at the peak, he would face not just the weight of 3 bundles, but the weight of his own choice. Greed awakens, the climb grew steeper, the path narrower, and each stone he stepped on seemed ready to roll away beneath his boots. The young man leaned forward under the crushing weight of 3 bundles, copper pressing his left shoulder, silver digging into his right, gold strapped across his back like the crown of a king that hadn't been earned. His breath rasped in the cold air, and his vision blurred from the strain. Yet through the exhaustion, a fire burned inside him, hotter and brighter than his aching muscles. Gold. The word pulsed in his mind with every heartbeat. Gold meant freedom. Gold meant respect. Gold meant no more lonely nights staring at the ceiling of an empty house. He pictured himself walking through a marketplace, not as a servant or a beggar, but as a man of means, coins gleaming in his hands, merchants bowing to his choices. He pictured fine clothes, food rich with flavor, the warm company of people drawn, not by pity, but by admiration. The fantasy fed his legs more than food ever had. Every step became easier in thought, if not in body. His back screamed with pain, yet his spirit leapt ahead, chasing the vision of what could be his. But then another thought whispered, darker than the rest. Why wait? Why carry the fakir's burdens all the way to another village when he could take them now? Here, on this lonely mountain path, no one was watching. The fakir, frail and empty-handed, could never chase him. The road behind was deserted, the road ahead silent. If he ran now, everything would be his. His chest tightened, not from the climb, but from the storm inside. He tried to remind himself of the promised 3 gold coins for his help. But the whisper of promise seemed small compared to the roar of greed. Why settle for 3 coins when he carried all the treasure on his back? The boy clenched his jaw, forcing his feet to keep climbing, his thoughts circling tighter and tighter. He looked sideways at the fakir. The old man's face was calm, almost serene, his cane tapping against the stones. That calmness stung. Did the fakir not realize how much he suffered? Did he not care? Anger sparked. Resentment joined greed, feeding the fire until it burned hotter than his shame. He told himself a new story, one easier to believe. Perhaps the fakir was no holy man at all, but a thief in disguise. Perhaps he had stolen the gold, the silver, the copper, and now sought to use the boy as his mule. If that was true, then taking the bundles would not be theft, but justice. Why should a thief keep stolen wealth when he himself, poor and honest, had carried it this far? The boy almost laughed at how neatly the thought fit into place. He could feel the greed sharpening into something that sounded like logic. He wasn't betraying anyone, he told himself. He was correcting a wrong. The mountain path wound higher, the air thinner, the silence heavier. His body staggered, his mind raced. The fantasies grew clearer. His own shop, his own home, his own life filled with more than repetition, and each fantasy came with a whisper, "Just run, and it's all yours." He looked again at the fakir. The old man's gaze was on the path, but the boy swore those eyes knew more than they revealed. It unsettled him, made him feel seen in ways he didn't want. He quickened his steps, putting a little distance between them, his heart pounding not from the climb, but from the decision forming inside him. And maybe, as you listen, you recognize that pattern too. The way the mind justifies what the heart craves, how desire twists itself into logic until wrong begins to look like right. It's part of being human. We all have those moments where temptation dresses itself in reason. Pause with me here. Inhale deeply. Let the breath fill your chest. Hold it. Then exhale slowly, letting it soften the grip of your own restless thoughts. Notice how greed feels in the body. Tight, hot, urgent. Notice how it loosens when you simply breathe and let it pass. The boy did not pause. He climbed faster, chasing the rhythm of his fantasies. The fakir's steps grew distant behind him, his cane tapping slower, softer. Alone with his thoughts, the boy's greed no longer whispered, it shouted. His choice was nearly made. At the top of the mountain, where the path tipped downward into shadow, the boy knew the moment would come. Either he would keep his word, or he would run, and with him would go all the wealth he thought would change his life. And as the peak drew closer, the fire of greed burned brighter, ready to consume every other voice inside him. The silent climb. The mountain path narrowed into a ribbon of stone, winding upward beneath the pale glow of the moon. Loose gravel slid beneath the boy's boots. Each step uncertain, each movement demanding balance he barely had left. His shoulders throbbed where the ropes cut deep, his back bent lower under the 3 heavy bundles. And yet, for all the pain of his body, the louder struggle was in his mind. Greed pulsed with every heartbeat, copper, silver, gold wealth, greater than anything he had touched. He imagined their shine spilling across the floor of his small room, piles of coins replacing the silence that had been his only companion. He could almost taste the sweetness of food he'd never been able to afford, feel the weight of fine cloth across his skin, hear laughter where there had been only quiet. But the climb forced silence. The road allowed no idle chatter, no easy distraction. The fakir walked behind, his cane tapping gently, steady as a drumbeat. That sound filled the air between them, leaving the boy alone with his storm of thoughts. Each tap reminded him he wasn't truly alone, and yet the silence from the old man pressed heavier than words. It was as though the fakir knew the battle raging in him and had chosen not to interrupt. The boy's breath grew ragged. His chest rose and fell like a bellows, his throat raw from the cold air. Every few steps he wanted to stop, to rest, but pride kept his legs moving. Pride and something darker fear. Fear that if he faltered, the fakir would see his weakness, and worse, his intentions. He wanted to appear strong, honest, capable, even as his mind whispered betrayal. The silence sharpened his thoughts. They came like waves crashing harder and harder against his resolve. Why carry this weight for someone else? Why let your life remain small when freedom is on your back right now? No one would know. No one would stop you. The fakir is old. He cannot run. He stumbled, knees buckling. The bundles shifted dangerously. For a terrifying second, he thought he might fall, the coins scattering across the rocks, the fakir watching in quiet disappointment. He gasped, adjusted, steadied himself. His heart pounded faster, sweat dripping down his temples. The thought of failure filled him with shame. But another thought rose right after. Better to fail while running away than to fail while serving. The climb stretched longer, steeper, crueler. And yet through the struggle, a strange rhythm formed. Step, gasp, heartbeat, silence. Step, gasp, heartbeat, silence. The mountain became a mirror, reflecting the chaos of his mind back to him. He saw himself clearly in that reflection, not just the boy who wanted comfort, but the boy who wanted more than he had earned. And maybe you know that mirror too. In the quiet moments of your own life, when no one is watching, the silence can show you truths you'd rather ignore. It can reveal the greed, the fear, the hunger that hide beneath the surface of your smile. Pause with me here. Inhale deeply. Let the air expand your chest. Hold it gently. Then exhale slowly, feeling the weight in your body ease just for a breath. Notice how silence feels. Not threatening, not heavy, but simply present. The boy could not notice this way. For him, silence was a battlefield. Every time the fakir's cane tapped against the stones, the boy's thoughts grew louder. Take the gold, take the silver, take the copper. This is your chance. If you don't act now, you may never escape the life that waits for you. He gritted his teeth, climbing faster, eager to outpace not just the fakir, but his own hesitation. His mind screamed louder than his aching muscles. He convinced himself he was justified. He convinced himself the fakir must have stolen the wealth, and if so, why shouldn't he steal it back? The higher they climbed, the quieter the world became. No birds called, no wind stirred. Only the boy's heavy breathing and the cane's steady rhythm. The silence no longer seemed natural. It seemed deliberate, as though the mountain itself had hushed to watch him wrestle with his choice. At last, the path widened slightly, revealing the summit ahead, its edges silvered by moonlight. The boy felt his pulse race not from exertion, but from the decision forming in his chest. The climb was nearly over, and once they reached the top, the road would tip downward. A downhill path, a chance to run faster than the fakir could ever follow. The silence stretched tighter, every second loaded with possibility. The boy's mind, once filled with doubt, now burned with determination. He knew what he wanted. He just hadn't acted yet. And as they neared the peak, the silence seemed to whisper back at him, daring him to choose. The temptation grows. The summit drew closer with every grinding step. The young man's legs shook, his breath ragged, the ropes digging deeper into his flesh as if the bundles themselves had grown teeth. Yet for all the pain, his mind clung to a single thought: gold. The word glittered inside him like a lantern in the dark, pulling him upward, pulling him away from reason. The path leveled out near the top, a brief reprieve before the descent began. He stopped for a moment, bending low, his chest heaving, sweat and river water dripping into the dust. Behind him, the fakir caught up, leaning heavily on his cane. The old man's face was lined and pale, yet his eyes were steady, watching. Always watching. The boy avoided his gaze. He did not want those eyes on him, not now, not when the storm inside him was so clear. He focused instead on the bundles. His bundles, he almost thought, and the possibilities they contained. Copper could buy food, silver could buy land, gold could buy freedom. With all three, he could build a life greater than anything he had dared imagine. And if he truly believed the story his mind had begun to weave, that the fakir was no holy wanderer, but a thief or a miser, then taking them was not sin, but justice. The temptation grew sharper, more convincing. He told himself he had earned it, carrying the weight without complaint. He told himself the fakir was testing him unfairly, piling burden upon burden while giving nothing in return. He told himself that life had cheated him long enough, that now it was his turn to take what he deserved. Each thought stacked neatly on the last, a tower of excuses reaching toward the ski. The fakir said nothing. He only adjusted his cane, breathed slowly, and kept his pace calm. His silence was unbearable. Did he know? Did he sense what the boy planned? Or was he blind to it all, trusting foolishly in the kindness of a stranger? The boy's chest burned with the tension of it, anger and greed mixing into something hotter than fire. His eyes drifted toward the path ahead. The mountain sloped downward from the summit, a steep descent leading into shadow. If he ran there, if he let the slope carry him, the fakir would never catch him. His heart hammered at the thought, beating faster than his steps. The bundles shifted as he straightened, almost as if they too leaned forward toward escape. And maybe, as you listen, you felt that same pull the moment when temptation stops being a whisper and becomes a shove. The moment when wrong feels not only possible, but justified. The line between good and bad blurs, and the heart convinces itself that taking is the same as surviving. Pause here with me. Take a deep breath in, hold it gently, then let it go. Notice the way your body responds to the thought of temptation. Does it tighten? Does it ache? Does it race? And notice too how the breath loosens that grip, how it reminds you that you are not your craving. The boy did not breathe this way. His lungs were already burning from the climb. His mind spun faster, louder, until it drowned out every other voice. He quickened his steps, moving just ahead of the fakir, testing the distance between them. The fakir did not react, did not hurry, only followed with the same quiet rhythm. The summit was nearly reached. One more rise, one more stretch of stone, and then the road would tilt down, opening into speed and freedom. The boy's heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst, not from exhaustion, but from the anticipation of what he was about to do. Every part of him was ready. The greed, the excuses, the anger, the desire. All that remained was the moment. The moment when his feet would break into a run, when he would leave the fakir behind forever, when the bundles would be his alone. And, as the summit came into sight, silvered by moonlight, the temptation inside him no longer whispered. It roared. Running away. The summit arrived like the edge of a dream. One final stretch of rock, one final push of aching legs, and the boy stood at the peak of the mountain. The world opened before him in shadows and silver light, the road dropping steeply into the valley below. The slope seemed to call him, inviting him to let go, to run, to fly. His breath caught, not from exhaustion this time, but from the wild rush of possibility. Behind him, the fakir climbed the last steps slowly, leaning on his cane, his pace unhurried. The old man's silence had become unbearable, like a drumbeat in the boy's chest. Every part of him screamed, "This is the moment. The slope will carry you. The night will hide you. The bundles are yours." The boy's hands tightened on the ropes, his body swaying forward. The thought of the fakir's promised 3 coins for each burden now felt insulting. Why settle for scraps when he carried copper, silver, and gold in his own arms? Why play the servant when he could be the master? His mind was loud, louder than the wind sweeping across the peak. He took a step forward, then another, his pace quickening. His chest pounded, his thoughts screamed, and then, without looking back, he broke into a run. The bundles bounced against him, heavy yet strangely light, as though greed itself had lifted part of their weight. His feet struck the stones hard, the slope carrying him faster and faster. The mountain air whipped against his face, the night roaring in his ears. For the first time he felt free, not from the burden, but from the pretense of carrying it for someone else. Now it was his. All his. His heart soared. He imagined himself bursting into the valley, reaching his home, spilling the contents of the bundles onto the floor. Copper, silver, gold. It would shine like sunlight captured in metal. His life would change in an instant. He laughed aloud, the sound sharp against the stillness of the night. Behind him, the fakir did not chase. The boy knew this without even looking back. The old man could not follow. The mountain was too steep, the night too long, the distance already too great. The boy felt untouchable, unstoppable, a king in the making. Yet, as he ran, something strange stirred inside him. The weight did not vanish. It pressed heavier, cutting deeper, every step grinding into his muscles. His lungs burned, his knees screamed, but he forced himself onward. Greed fueled him, greed carried him, greed blinded him. The road narrowed, twisted, stones sliding beneath his feet. He nearly stumbled but caught himself, clutching the bundles tighter, as though letting go would mean losing everything. And maybe you can feel that rush too. As you listen, the way desire can turn into speed, the way temptation can feel like freedom even while it drags us down. It's intoxicating. It's dangerous. And often it ends differently than we imagine. Pause here with me. Inhale slowly. Hold that breath for a moment, and then exhale. Notice how quickly the heart races when you imagine running with what isn't yours. Notice too how calm returns when you simply breathe and let the thought pass. The boy did not breathe this way. His lungs heaved, his mind roared, and still he ran. Faster, harder, down the slope. He felt the bundles press into him, their weight shifting with every step, but he refused to slow down. The vision of gold gleaming in his home burned brighter than the pain in his body. He ran until the mountain slope began to ease, until the path straightened into the valley floor. His chest heaved, his legs shook, his vision blurred from the effort. But he was laughing still, laughing through his exhaustion, convinced that he had won. And as he slowed, clutching the bundles, he thought of only one thing. Soon he would open them. Soon the copper, the silver, the gold would be his. Soon the loneliness of his nights would be replaced by the glitter of wealth. He did not know yet that what waited inside those bundles was not what he believed. The real weight of his choice had yet to reveal itself. The rusted coins. The boy stumbled into the valley, his chest burning, his breath tearing at his throat. His legs finally gave out, and he collapsed to his knees, the bundles thudding against the ground with a dull, heavy sound. For a long moment, he simply knelt there, hands pressed against the ropes, sweat dripping down his face. He had done it. He had outrun the fakir, outrun his doubts, outrun his own hesitation. The treasure was his now. He stared at the bundles, his heart pounding with excitement. His fingers shook as they reached for the knot of the first rope. It was the copper bundle, the one that had seemed so heavy at first, yet promised only a modest fortune. Still, copper was copper, and the boy's eyes glittered as he pulled the rope free. The fabric loosened, the bundle opened, and the contents spilled into the moonlight. He froze. The coins that rolled across the dirt were not copper at all. They were rusted iron, corroded and ugly, their edges sharp, their surfaces flaking. The smell of damp metal hit his nose, acrid and bitter. His breath caught in his chest. This was not treasure. This was junk. His hand scrambled frantically through the pile, as if somewhere within it he might find a gleam of real value. But everywhere his fingers touched, only rust stained his skin. His heart dropped like a stone into cold water. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "No, this must be wrong." His eyes darted to the second bundle, the silver. His chest swelled again with desperate hope. Maybe the first was a trick. Maybe the second would shine true. He tore at the ropes with trembling hands, pulled the knot loose, and ripped open the cloth. Coins tumbled out, clattering into the dirt. Iron again, rusted, broken, worthless. The boy gasped, his chest hollow. His hands moved faster now, almost violently, ripping at the third bundle. This was the gold, the one that had filled his imagination, the one that had promised to change his life. His fingers clawed at the rope, tore the knot apart, and flung the cloth open. More iron, more rust, piles of it, spilling onto the ground until the dirt was covered with shards of decay. The weight he had carried was not treasure, not silver, not gold. It had been worthless from the beginning. The boy's cry tore into the night, sharp and broken. He fell back onto the ground, clutching his head, his body shaking with rage and despair. All the pain he had endured, all the thoughts of freedom, all the fire of greed, it had led to nothing but ruin. His laughter of triumph was gone, replaced by bitter sobs. And then he saw it. Nestled within the torn cloth of the gold bundle, hidden among the rusted coins, was a small folded letter. His hand shook as he reached for it, tearing the paper open with frantic fingers. "By the light of the moon," he read. The words struck harder than the weight of the bundles ever had. This test was never about wealth. It was about honesty. The one who carried these burdens with purity of heart would have been chosen to inherit more than gold or silver. He would have been chosen to inherit a kingdom, but greed corrupts and dishonesty destroys. The boy's hands went limp. The paper slipped from his fingers, fluttering to the ground. His chest heaved as the truth sank in. The fakir had not been a beggar, not even a wanderer. He had been the king in disguise, searching for someone honest enough to bear the weight of leadership. And the boy had failed. The realization burned hotter than any fire. He had not only lost treasure, he had lost the chance to transform his life in a way beyond his wildest dreams. All because he had given in to the whispers of his mind. And maybe you've known that sting too, the moment you realized temptation tricked you, that what seemed like gold was only rust. It is painful. It is humiliating. But it also reveals the truth. The real test is never about what we carry on our backs, but what we carry in our hearts. Pause with me here. Inhale deeply, hold it gently, and exhale slowly. Notice the rise and fall of your chest. Feel how the body softens when you let go of the weight of disappointment. Even when we fail, even when we stumble, breath remains. And breath is the beginning of another chance. The boy did not see it that way. Not yet. He tore at the dirt with his hands, crying out to the night, his voice raw with regret. The bundles lay broken around him, the rusted coins mocking him in silence. He had thought he was running toward freedom, but instead he had chained himself tighter than ever. And as the night stretched on, one truth became clear. The boy had not been carrying copper, silver, or gold. He had been carrying his own greed, and that weight was heavier than any bundle of metal. More disappointments. The boy sat in the dirt, his chest heaving, his face streaked with sweat and dust. The rusted coins glinted dully in the moonlight, sharp edges catching what little silver light spilled from above. His hands, cut and dirty from clawing through them, trembled as he stared. This was not treasure. This was mockery. He grabbed a handful of the coins and squeezed until the rust broke beneath his nails. They crumbled like old leaves, staining his palms with red-brown dust. He flung them away with a cry of fury. The sound echoed off the valley walls, but no answer came. No one was there to hear him. No one but the night. He turned desperately to the second bundle, though he had already emptied it. Maybe, just maybe, he had missed something. He tore through the cloth again, shaking out the scraps of rope, searching for a glimmer of silver among the iron. Nothing. Only shards of rust, only disappointment. He shoved the bundle aside with a grunt, his body shuddering with rage. His eyes darted to the last cloth, the one that had promised gold. His breath caught as if hope still clung stubbornly to his ribs. He ripped it wider, scattering more coins into the dirt, digging deeper and deeper with frantic hands. He wanted to believe there was something hidden, something he hadn't seen, something to save him from this humiliation. But the more he searched, the clearer the truth became. There was nothing, no copper, no silver, no gold, only iron, corroded and worthless. He had carried junk across roads and rivers and mountains, driven by fantasies that turned to ash the moment he touched them. His body collapsed forward, forehead pressed to the dirt. His chest shook with sobs that he could not stop. He pounded his fists into the ground, each strike scattering more rusted fragments, each strike cutting deeper into his palm. His cry was not only grief, it was shame. He had been fooled, but worse, he had fooled himself. The letter's words echoed in his mind. This test was never about wealth. It was about honesty. The king, because now he knew the fakir had been a king in disguise, had sought an honest heart. Someone strong enough to carry weight without greed, someone worthy of leading not just themselves, but an entire people. And what had he shown? Weakness, greed, betrayal. He had taken what was not his, convinced himself it was justified, run with a heart filled with fire, and ended up with nothing but rust. His mind replayed the choice over and over. If only he had stayed. If only he had trusted. If only he had carried the bundles to the village as he promised. He might have been rewarded with more than he could imagine. Perhaps not just coins, but a crown. Perhaps not just wealth, but purpose. The thought crushed him more heavily than the bundles ever had. And maybe you felt that sting too. the regret that gnaws at you, the realization that one wrong choice closed a door you can never open again. It's the kind of pain that keeps you awake at night, replaying the moment in your mind, whispering, "If only, if only." Pause here with me. Take a slow inhale, let it fill your lungs. Hold it for a count. Then exhale, letting the regret in your chest ease even if just a little. Notice how the body loosens when you stop clinging to what can't be undone. The boy did not know how to do this. His mind clung tighter with every passing second. He saw himself standing on the mountain again, tempted but hesitant. He saw the moment he broke into a run, the moment greed carried him down the slope. He saw the bundles fall open in his hands, the truth spilling into the dirt. He could not let it go. His sobs softened into silence, but the silence was heavier than the cries. His body slumped, broken not by exhaustion but by disappointment. The rusted coins lay around him like ashes after a fire, reminders of what he had lost. Not gold, not silver, but his own chance at redemption. And as the night deepened, one truth echoed louder than all his cries. He had betrayed not the fakir, not the king, but himself. The valley was still, but the story was not over. For beyond the rust and the letter, another revelation waited, one that would pierce deeper than disappointment and carve the lesson into his soul forever. The hidden letter. The boy's sobs had slowed into shallow breaths, his forehead still pressed against the dirt. His hands, raw and stung with rust, shook as he dragged them across the broken bundles. That was when his fingers brushed against something different, not metal, not rope, but paper. His breath caught. He pulled it out slowly, carefully, as though even this scrap might crumble into dust. It was a folded letter, worn at the edges, sealed with a mark pressed faintly into the wax. The boy tore it open with trembling hands. The paper crackled as he unfolded it under the moonlight, the words written in bold, careful strokes. His eyes moved across the lines, and with each sentence, his chest grew heavier. To the one who carries these burdens, know that the weight was never coins. The true weight was choice. If you had walked with honesty, if you had carried without greed, you would have found not rust, but trust. You would have found not treasure, but destiny. For I am no fakir. I am the king of this land, searching for a soul pure enough to inherit not just wealth, but the crown itself. The boy's mouth went dry. His eyes darted back to the rusted coins scattered in the dirt. His heart pounded, louder and louder as the truth sank in. The letter continued, I have no heir. My people need a leader whose strength is not measured by muscle or by greed, but by the honesty of his heart. The one who resists temptation, the one who chooses truth over desire, would have been chosen to lead after me. This trial was never about the bundles. It was about the man who carried them. The boy's breath shattered. His body trembled as if the mountain itself had collapsed upon him. He had not just lost coins, he had lost a kingdom. He had lost the chance to become more than he had ever dreamed. He read the words again, desperate to find some loophole, some escape. But the ink did not change. The truth was fixed. He had run away, and in doing so, he had run past his own future. His hands crushed the letter against his chest, his face twisting with agony. He let out a cry, louder than any before, a cry that echoed through the valley like a wounded animal. He fell onto his side, curling around the letter, sobbing as though his tears could rewrite what had been written. The silence of the night answered him with indifference. The rusted coins lay scattered, dull and mocking. The mountain stood above him, silent witness to his failure. Somewhere behind, on the path he had abandoned, the fakir, the king still walked. Maybe he knew already. Maybe he had expected this. Maybe he had never truly hoped. The boy's thoughts turned cruel against himself. Why had he listened to the whispers? Why had he let greed dress itself as logic, as justice? Why had he convinced himself the fakir was a thief, when all along the real theft had been his own betrayal of trust? The shame burned deeper than fire, leaving him raw and hollow. And perhaps, as you listen now, you recognize the echo of that moment. We all have choices we wish we could rewrite, letters we wish had said something different. The sting of regret is sharp because it shows us the distance between who we are and who we could have been. Pause with me. Inhale deeply, fill your chest with air, then exhale slowly. Imagine holding a letter of your own, the kind that reveals a truth about yourself you'd rather not face. Notice the way it hurts. Notice too that even pain is a teacher, showing you what matters most. The boy clutched the letter tighter, his tears dampening the ink. His heart felt split between despair and disbelief. He had failed the test. He had lost the crown, lost the trust, lost the chance to become more than a lonely servant. All that remained was the echo of what might have been. But the story was not done. For in the weight of his grief, in the ashes of his greed, the boy was about to learn the deepest truth of all, that the battle was never with the king, never with the bundles, never even with the mountain. The battle had always been with his own mind. A cry of regret. The boy lay curled on the ground, the letter clutched so tightly in his fists that the paper wrinkled and tore. His chest heaved in uneven gasps, his throat raw from crying. The valley was silent around him, but inside his body, a storm raged. His heart slammed against his ribs as if it wanted to escape, as if it too could not bear the truth. A sound burst from him, louder than he thought his body could hold. A cry part scream, part sob tore into the night. It rolled up the mountain slopes and scattered into the trees, frightening the birds from their nests. It was the cry of a man who had realized too late what he had thrown away. The rusted coins around him glittered faintly in the moonlight, mocking him. He clawed at them, his nails breaking against their corroded edges. He flung handfuls into the darkness, the shards clattering uselessly against the stones. "Worthless!" he shouted, his voice hoarse. "All worthless!" But it wasn't the coins he was condemning, it was himself. His mind replayed the moment again and again, the summit, the slope, the decision to run. Each time he saw it, he thought, if I had only paused, if I had only resisted, if I had only remembered my word. Each if was a blade, cutting deeper, opening wounds no hand could close. He pressed the letter against his chest, rocking back and forth, his tears soaking into the paper. "I could have been king," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I could have been more. I could have been chosen." The night air chilled him, but he hardly noticed. Shame was a hotter fire, burning through every part of him. The burden on his shoulders was gone, but the burden in his heart had doubled, tripled, until it was more crushing than copper, silver, or gold ever could have been. And maybe you know that cry too, the cry of regret, the cry that comes when the weight of your choices finally falls on you. It's the sound of realizing the past cannot be rewritten, that your feet have already carried you too far down a road you cannot walk backward. Pause here with me. Inhale deeply, let the breath fill you. Hold it for a moment, then exhale slowly, releasing the weight you carry in your chest. Notice how even regret softens when you breathe with it instead of against it. The boy could not soften, not yet. His breath came in sharp bursts, his body shuddering. He slammed his fists into the earth until his knuckles bled. He begged the night for another chance, begged the silence to answer, begged the king wherever he was to forgive him, to let him try again. But the silence gave no reply. His eyes blurred with tears, but the words of the letter remained carved into his mind. This trial was never about wealth. It was about honesty. He had failed that honesty. He had betrayed the one thing that mattered most. And now the crown, the kingdom, the future, all of it was lost. The cry of regret broke him open, leaving him hollow. He lay flat on his back, staring at the stars, his chest rising and falling like a dying fire. The stars blinked down indifferently, as if to remind him that the universe does not bend for one man's sorrow. The world would go on, the kingdom would go on. He alone was left in the dirt. Yet in that hollow space, in the silence after the storm, something subtle stirred. A truth he could not deny. His greatest enemy had never been the fakir, nor the king. His enemy had always been his own mind, his own restless thoughts, his own unguarded desires. He did not yet know what to do with this truth, for now all he could do was cry. Cry for the life he had thrown away. Cry for the man he had proven himself to be. Cry until there were no tears left. And as the night stretched deep and endless, one truth settled in the valley like a shadow. Regret may crush you, but it can also open your eyes. Buddha's reminder. The boy lay there in the dirt, emptied of strength, emptied of hope. His cries had faded into silence, his chest rising and falling in shallow gasps. Around him the rusted coins sat lifeless, dull reminders of how far he had fallen. The night air pressed cold against his skin. But inside, his heart still burned with the sting of regret. And then, almost like a whisper carried by the breeze, he remembered words he had once heard. Long ago, when he was younger, someone had spoken of the teachings of the Buddha. He had not listened carefully at the time, but now, broken and alone, the memory returned with startling clarity. The mind is everything. What you think, you become. He repeated the words silently, tasting them as though for the first time. The mind is everything. What you think, you become. Suddenly the path of his own downfall was clear. He had thought of wealth, and so he had become greedy. He had thought of suspicion, and so he had become a thief in his own heart. He had thought of excuses, and so he had become a liar to himself. It was not the bundles that had weighed him down, it was his thoughts. The realization cut sharper than the loss of the kingdom. His greatest enemy had never been the fakir, never been the test, never been the rusted coins. His enemy had always been his own restless, unguarded mind. He closed his eyes, tears slipping from the corners. The teachings returned in fragments, like stars emerging slowly in the sky. Your worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your unguarded thoughts. He saw the truth of it now. The fakir had not destroyed him. His own thoughts had whispered, then persuaded, then commanded, until he could no longer tell right from wrong. And perhaps you have seen this too in your own life. The way one thought, left unchecked, grows like a seed into something larger than you imagined. Doubt becomes despair. Desire becomes obsession. Anger becomes cruelty. The thought plants itself quietly, but given time, it takes root and spreads until it overwhelms you. Pause here with me. Inhale slowly, letting the breath fill your chest. Hold it gently. Then exhale, releasing the clutter of thoughts that weigh you down. Imagine each exhale clearing away one restless idea, one heavy worry. The mind softens when you give it space to breathe. The boy did not yet know how to breathe this way, but he was beginning to see. He looked at his hands, stained with rust, trembling with weakness, and he whispered to himself, "My thoughts betrayed me. I was careless. I let them grow wild." He thought back to the mountain climb, to the whispers of temptation that had seemed harmless at first. A little curiosity, a little suspicion, a little greed. Each had felt like nothing, a small spark in the dark. But sparks, left alone, had become flames. Flames had become fire. Fire had consumed him before he realized he was burning. The Buddha's words rang truer than ever. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. He had become exactly what his thoughts had led him to be: weak, greedy, dishonest, ashamed. His tears slowed. A strange calm settled in his chest. The pain of loss was still there, but so was the clarity of understanding. For the first time since he had opened the bundles, he felt as though he had glimpsed the real lesson hidden in the trial. It was not about coins, not about kings, not even about crowns. It was about the battlefield of the mind. And as he sat in silence, letter pressed against his chest, the night no longer seemed indifferent. It seemed like a teacher, echoing back the reminder that his future would not be shaped by what he had lost, but by what he chose to think from this moment onward. The boy breathed deeper, steadier. His chest no longer felt as heavy. His shoulders sagged, but not from bundles, only from release. He whispered the words again, softer this time, almost like a prayer. The mind is everything. What you think, you become. The lesson had begun to take root, but the night was not finished teaching him. For even seeds of wisdom must be tended, or they too can wither. And soon, another memory would rise of how thoughts, like seeds, grow into the shape of your entire life. Seeds of thought. The boy sat in the valley, his hands still stained with rust, the letter clutched against his chest. His tears had slowed, leaving behind a hollow quiet. The night pressed around him, cool and steady, almost as if it wanted him to listen. And in that silence, more words he had once heard returned to him. Words about thoughts being like seeds. He whispered to himself, broken but attentive. A thought is a seed. What we plant, we grow. The truth of it washed over him now, clear as moonlight. Every seed he had allowed into his mind had sprouted. At first, they were small little curiosities, little doubts, little whispers of desire. He had ignored them, thinking they were harmless. But seeds do not stay small. Left alone, they grow. His doubts had grown into suspicion. His desires had grown into greed, and his greed had grown into betrayal. He looked around at the rusted coins scattered in the dirt, and they seemed like the perfect mirror of his mind, worthless, corroded, ugly. Not because they had started that way, but because he had fed the wrong seeds. He remembered how it began on the lonely road. Just one small thought. What if I kept the bundle? At first, he dismissed it, but he hadn't pulled it out by the roots. He had left it in the soil of his mind, and so it grew. By the time he reached the mountain, it had become a forest of temptation, too thick to see through. And maybe you've seen this too in your own life. the way one tiny thought can grow until it shapes your whole day, your whole mood, your whole path. A single worry becomes endless anxiety. A single spark of anger becomes a fire that burns relationships. A single greedy impulse becomes a pattern of choices you can't undo. Pause with me. Inhale slowly. Notice a thought drifting into your mind. Don't judge it, just see it. Then exhale and imagine letting that thought fall away like a leaf from a tree. Notice how light you feel when you do not feed it. The boy wished he had learned this sooner. He wished he had known to notice the seed before it grew. But now the lesson was clear. The king had not been testing his strength, nor his endurance, nor his loyalty to another. He had been testing the boy's loyalty to his own mind. He thought of the Buddha's words again. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. What if that was true? Then the world he had created was one of greed and regret. But maybe, just maybe, another world was still possible if he planted different seeds. He pressed his palms into the dirt, letting the soil grind into his skin. I chose wrongly, he whispered, but I can choose again. The words trembled, but they felt real. For the first time that night, he felt the faintest stirrings of hope. He imagined planting different seeds, patience instead of impatience, honesty instead of excuses, compassion instead of greed. What kind of world might grow from those seeds? Perhaps a life with less wealth, but more peace. Perhaps a heart that did not need gold to feel full. The valley seemed to listen, the wind brushing against him like an answer. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, picturing his thoughts as a garden. Some weeds still grew there, sharp, tangled, choking. But he could see now that the weeds had not destroyed him forever. They had only shown him how important it was to tend the soil. And perhaps you can imagine your own garden now. What seeds have you planted today? What thoughts did you water without realizing? The mind will grow whatever you feed it. That is its nature. The question is not whether it grows, but what it grows into. Pause here again. Breathe in, hold the air softly, then exhale. With that breath, choose one seed you would like to plant tonight. Something small, something kind, something honest. Imagine setting it gently in the soil of your mind. Imagine watering it with attention. Imagine how it might grow tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. The boy did not know if the king would forgive him, or if he would ever see him again, but he knew one thing with certainty. He could not let his mind remain wild and untended. Every thought mattered. Every seed mattered. And from this moment on, he would try to plant carefully. The rusted coins no longer looked like mockery. They looked like reminders. Each one a warning of what happens when greed is watered instead of honesty. Each one a seed he should never plant again. The night deepened around him, quiet and still. He held the letter close, not as a curse, but as a guide, and though his heart still ached, he felt a shift inside, a new seed taking root. The lesson of seeds was clear, but the king's test held more than one truth. Soon the boy would remember another teaching, that when greed wins, even the strongest mind can lose itself. When greed wins. The boy sat surrounded by the broken bundles, the moonlight catching on piles of rusted coins. His body was exhausted, but his mind would not rest. The lesson of seeds still echoed in him, yet another truth pressed heavier, the truth of what happens when greed wins. He replayed the climb in his mind, each step, each whisper. At first, the thought of taking the coins had been small, almost harmless. Then it grew louder, convincing him that it was fair, even logical. By the time he reached the summit, the thought had become a command, and he had obeyed without hesitation. He could see it clearly now. Greed had not only stolen his honesty, it had stolen his judgment, his reason, his very ability to choose. The moment he believed the lie that his desire was justified, his freedom vanished. He had become a prisoner of his own craving. He whispered to himself, broken but honest, I was not carrying copper or silver or gold. I was carrying greed, and greed carried me. The valley was silent, but the words echoed inside him. Greed had made him run faster than he thought possible, climb harder than his body should have endured. It had given him energy, but it had taken his soul. The fire that had fueled him was also the fire that had burned him down. And maybe you felt this too. How greed or desire or craving can give a rush of energy, a sense of power, a feeling of unstoppable momentum, but afterward, always afterward, it leaves ashes. It leaves emptiness. It leaves regret. Pause here with me. Inhale deeply, hold that breath for a moment, then exhale slowly. Notice how the body softens when you remember that greed is not power. It is hunger pretending to be strength. The boy lifted one of the rusted coins, turning it in his fingers. In the faint light, he imagined for a moment that it gleamed like gold. His chest tightened with longing. Even knowing the truth, some part of him still wanted it to be real. That was greed's final cruelty. It clings even when exposed, whispering, maybe, just maybe. He dropped the coin and let it roll into the dirt. No more, he muttered. I will not believe it again. His voice was shaky, but there was steel beneath the cracks. He thought of the fakir, the king, still somewhere behind him on the mountain. What would the old man say if he saw him now? Would he call him a thief, a fool, or would he only look at him with the same calm silence, letting the boy see his own reflection in it? The thought made him shiver, but deeper still, another thought stirred. What if the king had expected this? What if the trial was not only about carrying the bundles, but about falling, about failing, about learning through the weight of regret? Could even failure be a teacher? The boy's chest rose and fell slowly. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine that this pain was not the end. That even when greed wins, something can still be gained, if not a crown, then a lesson. And perhaps that is the hardest truth of all. Failure does not erase the chance to grow. Regret does not erase the chance to begin again. Greed may win for a moment, but wisdom can still rise in its ashes. Pause one more time with me. Breathe in deeply, then let it go. Imagine the weight of greed sliding off your shoulders with that exhale. Notice the space it leaves behind. Space where something new, something honest, something lighter can grow. The boy stared at the stars above, his chest aching but calmer. He knew he had lost what might never return, yet he also knew the night was not finished teaching him. The king's test had revealed his failure, but the Buddha's words revealed a path forward. Greed had won this battle. But perhaps, with awareness, it did not have to win the war. The valley held its silence, and the boy closed his eyes. His breath slowed, his thoughts softened. The lesson of greed settled in his bones. And soon, another truth would arrive, the reminder that the path out of darkness begins with one thing: the right intention. Right intention. The boy lay flat on the ground for what felt like hours, his body drained, his eyes fixed on the stars. The weight of greed still clung to him, but beneath it, something softer had begun to stir. A memory, faint but persistent, surfaced from his childhood. Words spoken about the path of the Buddha, words about right intention. He whispered it aloud, his voice hoarse. Right intention, the seed of every action. The phrase lingered in the air, and slowly its meaning unfolded in his mind. Every choice he had made that night had sprouted from the wrong intention. At first, he had helped the fakir out of kindness, a genuine desire to lighten the burden of another. But once greed entered, his intention shifted. He still carried the bundles, but no longer for compassion. He carried them for reward. And once he ran, he no longer carried them for honesty at all. He carried them only for himself. The act itself had not changed. He was still carrying bundles. But the intention behind it had transformed the act completely. He sat up slowly, his body groaning, his breath shallow. It was never about what I carried, he muttered, but why I carried it. And maybe this feels true for you as well. The same action can come from two different hearts. A gift can be given to uplift, or it can be given to impress. Words can be spoken to heal or to manipulate. Work can be done for growth or for greed. What changes the value is not the action, it is the intention. Pause with me here. Inhale deeply, hold the air in your chest, then exhale gently. As you breathe, think of one action you've taken recently. Ask yourself, why did I do it? Was it to help or to gain? Was it to heal or to harm? Notice how the answer shifts the weight of the action itself. The boy closed his eyes and thought of the moment when the fakir first asked him for help. Back then, his heart had been pure. He had said yes out of compassion, not for coins. In that moment, he had felt light despite the weight. His shoulders ached, but his spirit had been steady. That was the power of right intention. It transformed burden into purpose. Then he thought of the river, the mountain, the summit. Each step heavier, not only because of the bundles, but because his heart had darkened. The wrong intention had poisoned even his strength, making each breath a battle, each step a punishment. He opened his eyes, staring into the night sky. Right intention makes the same road easier, he whispered, and wrong intention makes even the shortest path impossible. The lesson was clear now. The king had not tested his muscles or his stamina, or even his honesty alone. He had tested the source of his intentions, and the boy had failed because he had not noticed the shift until it was too late. But perhaps, he thought, this failure could be the beginning of something new. He could not change the past, but he could change the soil of his heart. He could choose what seeds to plant next. And the first seed had to be intention, the honest, steady kind that grows into peace instead of regret. He pressed his hand against the letter resting on the ground beside him. Its words still stung, but now they felt less like condemnation and more like guidance. The king had wanted an heir who could lead with honesty. That chance was lost, but the lesson remained, and maybe that is how life always works. Opportunities come and go. Some are missed forever, but the wisdom they leave behind can shape what comes next. Right intention cannot undo the past, but it can create a future that feels lighter. Pause once more with me. Inhale gently. Feel the air rise in your chest. Hold it. Then exhale slowly, letting go of the weight of wrong intentions you've carried. Imagine planting a new seed in the soil of your mind. An intention rooted in kindness, honesty, or patience. Notice how it feels to carry that instead. The boy drew his knees close, rested his head against them, and whispered again, this time with more conviction. Right intention. That is where I must begin. The rusted coins no longer glared at him as reminders of failure. Instead, they sat quietly, like warnings, pointing him back toward the truth he had ignored. And though his body was weary, his mind felt lighter, steadier. He had begun to understand that the way forward was not strength of muscle, but clarity of heart. The night deepened around him, stars glittering like seeds scattered across the sky. He breathed with them, slow and steady, holding on to the lesson, and soon another thought rose in him, how to question himself more honestly, how to test his own intentions before they turned into action. Self-questioning. The boy sat quietly, his breath steadier now, though his body still trembled with exhaustion. The letter lay across his lap, its edges bent, its words echoing in his mind. He repeated softly, right intention, right intention. But then another thought rose. How do I know my intention is right? How do I stop myself from being fooled again? He closed his eyes and tried to imagine the moment before his greed took over. If he had paused, just paused, and asked himself, why am I doing this? Would he have chosen differently? Perhaps. Perhaps not. But he realized now that the question itself was the key. What is my true reason? He whispered into the still night. What am I really seeking? He thought of how often his answers would have betrayed him. When he carried the first bundle, his reason was compassion, but when he took the second, it was reward, and by the third, it was greed. His actions looked the same, lifting, carrying, walking, but the reason behind them had shifted. And it was the reason that had destroyed him. He understood now that self-questioning had to be his daily guard. Before every word, before every act, he must ask, is this rooted in kindness or in selfishness? Is this for truth or for deceit? Will this lift others or only myself? Without these questions, the weeds of wrong intention would grow again, hidden until too late. And maybe you felt this too. How easy it is to act without pausing, to move forward because the world pushes us, only to discover later that our reasons were tangled. We speak words that wound, though we meant to defend. We make choices that harm, though we meant to grow. Without self-questioning, we live blind. Pause with me here. Inhale slowly, let the breath rise, then exhale gently. As you breathe, think of one action you plan to take tomorrow. Ask yourself right now, why am I doing it? Notice the answer that comes. If it feels cloudy or selfish, notice that too. The noticing is the beginning of clarity. The boy lifted his head, eyes burning with tiredness, yet shining with determination. He thought of the king's test again, and how quickly he had failed it. He told himself, if I am to walk forward from this night, I must carry not bundles, but questions. I must never let my thoughts go unchallenged. He placed the letter beside him and pressed his palms together. What is my intention? He asked aloud, as if speaking to the stars. The question felt strange, but also grounding. He realized that even asking it shifted his mind from craving to awareness. He imagined a life built on this habit. Each morning, asking himself, why am I working? Each time he spoke asking, "Why am I saying this?" Each step he took asking, "Why am I going this way?" The questions might slow him, yes, but perhaps slowing was the very medicine his restless mind needed. The wind moved through the valley, brushing cool air across his face. It felt almost like an answer. He breathed with it, steady, calm. And perhaps you can imagine this in your own life too. Tomorrow, when you face a choice, big or small, pause just for a breath and ask, "Why am I doing this?" That one question might change the entire weight of your action. Pause once more with me. Inhale deeply, hold for a count, then exhale. With that breath, imagine planting the habit of self-questioning in your mind. See it take root, steady and clear, a quiet guardian that watches over your choices. The boy looked at the stars, his heart still aching from what he had lost, but steadied by what he had found. He would not undo his mistakes, but he could guard against them in the future. That was the power of self-questioning. It could not rewrite the past, but it could rewrite the path ahead. The night grew deeper, and with it came another memory of the Buddha's words. This one about the sting of regret, and how even the sorrow of failure could awaken a man to live more wisely. Awakening regret. The boy leaned back against the cold earth, his eyes fixed on the endless sky above him. The stars looked sharp and distant, like truths he could see but never touch. His chest still ached, not only from the climb and the run, but from the weight of what he had thrown away. Regret filled him like a tide, rising higher with every breath. Yet as he sat in that silence, he noticed something strange. Regret was painful, yes, sharp and merciless, but it was also clear. Unlike greed, which had clouded his mind with promises, regret stripped everything bare. It showed him exactly where he had fallen, exactly which step had turned him from honesty to betrayal. For the first time all night, he could see the path of his failure without illusions. He whispered to himself, "Regret is a mirror. It hurts to look, but it shows me the truth." The tears that still clung to his cheeks did not feel empty anymore. They felt like a cleansing, as if the salt of them was washing away the lies he had told himself. He realized now that regret, though cruel, had a gift hidden inside it. Awareness. Awareness of what mattered, awareness of what he must guard against in the future. He remembered another teaching he had once overheard. Regret is the teacher that arrives after the mistake, but its lessons can guide you forever. The boy repeated it softly, letting the words settle in his chest. He thought of the way his mind had raced on the mountain, the excuses he had built, the stories he had told himself to justify greed. Regret burned those stories to ash. What was left was simple, undeniable truth. And maybe you felt this too. That sharp sting when you realize you've said something you shouldn't, or chosen a path that led you astray. The hurt is real, but within it is clarity. The pain tells you, this matters. This is not the person you want to be. Pause with me here. Inhale slowly, let the breath rise, then exhale gently. As you breathe, bring to mind a moment of regret in your own life. Notice the sting, yes, but also notice what it taught you. See how even sorrow can awaken something wise inside you. The boy lifted his head, his face streaked but calmer. "If I had not failed," he whispered, "I would never have seen myself so clearly. I would never have known how dangerous my thoughts could be." His voice was quiet but steady. He pressed the crumpled letter to his chest, the words about honesty, about the king's test still burned him, but they no longer felt like chains. They felt like instructions written in fire. His failure was undeniable, but the regret it left behind was sharpening him, teaching him. He thought of how greed had disguised itself as logic, how desire had spoken louder than duty. Without regret, he might never have realized the difference. But now he could see it. The line between right and wrong had not been faint. He had simply ignored it. Regret pulled him back to it, forced him to look. He took another breath, deeper this time. His chest still hurt, but the air moved more freely. For the first time, he felt as though his sorrow was not crushing him, but shaping him. Like a sculptor's chisel, regret was cutting away what was false, leaving behind something raw but true, and perhaps that is what regret really is. Not punishment, but awakening. It carves, it wounds, but in the end, it reveals. Pause once more. Inhale, hold, exhale. As you let the air leave your chest, imagine regret not as a weight, but as a teacher. Imagine it pointing you toward the kind of person you want to be. Notice how the pain feels different when you see it that way. The boy lowered his head, exhaustion pressing down again, but his heart carried a spark that had not been there before. Regret had broken him open, yes, but in that breaking, it had shown him the way forward. He whispered to the night, "I will not let this sorrow be wasted. If I must carry regret, then let it carry me into wisdom." The valley was still, but inside him something shifted. Regret had awakened him, sharpened him, stripped him of lies. And soon he would remember another teaching, that beyond regret lies the practice of watching the mind itself with no judgment, no reaction, the practice of mindfulness. Mindful watching. The boy sat still in the valley, his body worn, but his mind awake in a way it had never been before. The rusted coins lay scattered around him, a field of broken promises, yet he no longer clawed at them or cursed them. Instead, he simply looked. He watched how they caught the moonlight, how the rough edges glimmered faintly, how the silence of the night wrapped around them. For the first time, he noticed something. The coins were only coins. They did not whisper. They did not demand. It had been his mind all along that gave them power. His own restless thoughts had turned lumps of rust into treasures, had dressed worthless metal in the glow of gold. A memory stirred another teaching of the Buddha. Sit and watch your thoughts like clouds passing across the sky. Do not chase them. Do not fight them. Only see them. The boy closed his eyes. At once, the storm inside him stirred again. Flashes of desire, echoes of regret, the sting of shame. Thoughts leapt up one after another. You failed. You could have been king. You will always be poor. You are nothing. They pounded against him, sharp and merciless. But this time, he did not argue. He did not wrestle. He simply noticed. "This is shame," he whispered. "This is regret. This is greed." He let each thought rise, called it by its name, then watched it drift. One by one, they faded, like clouds dissolving into the dark sky. And maybe you felt this too. The mind is restless, always speaking, always shouting, convincing you to follow every thought as though it were real. But when you simply notice, when you sit still and watch, the thoughts lose their grip. They pass, they always pass. Pause with me here. Inhale deeply, let the breath rise, then exhale slowly. As you breathe, imagine yourself sitting beside the boy, watching your thoughts appear and dissolve. A worry, a memory, a desire. each one like a cloud drifting overhead. You don't need to chase them. You don't need to push them away. You only need to see them. The boy breathed this way for the first time in his life. At first, the thoughts fought back, clinging to him, shouting louder, but the more he watched, the quieter they became. His chest loosened, his shoulders softened. For a moment, he felt almost free. He opened his eyes and looked again at the coins. They no longer burned with temptation. They no longer mocked him with shame. They were only what they had always been, worthless metal. The power had never been in them. It had always been in his mind. A strange calm spread through him, soft but steady. He realized that this calm was not given by the world. It came from watching, from choosing not to react, from seeing clearly. It was a calm no one could take away, because it was born within. He whispered into the night, "This is freedom, not in gold, not in silver, but in seeing my mind without being ruled by it." And perhaps that is the freedom you need too. Not freedom from work, or from burden, or even from failure, but freedom from being pulled by every thought that rises in your head, the freedom to watch, to let go, to breathe. Pause again. Inhale, hold gently. Exhale. Notice one thought that clings to you tonight. See it, name it, then imagine it dissolving into the air as you release your breath. The boy leaned back, his body still aching but his heart lighter. He understood now why the king had created this trial. Not to give away coins, but to reveal the truth of the mind. The test had not ended with failure. It had revealed the path he must now walk, the path of watching, the path of mindfulness. The valley was silent, but no longer empty. It was alive with presence, the sound of his breath, the rustle of the wind, the glow of the stars. For once, he did not wish to be anywhere else. But the night still held more to teach. For as his mind grew calmer, he would discover another lesson, that when thoughts fade, the heart becomes spacious, empty, and ready for peace. Emptying the mind. The boy rested against the earth, eyes half closed, his breath steady for the first time in what felt like forever. The valley was still, holding him in its quiet arms. The rusted coins no longer glared at him. They simply existed, lifeless and harmless. And in that stillness, he began to sense something deeper, an emptiness inside him that was not frightening, but freeing. It came slowly, like a gentle tide. The more he watched his thoughts without clinging to them, the more space appeared in his mind. Where once there had been constant noise, temptation, fear, regret, now there was room, wide open room. It was as if his mind, long crowded with weeds, had been cleared. He felt lighter, not because the world had changed, but because he was no longer tangled in every thought that rose. He whispered to himself, "When the mind is empty, the heart is full." The words surprised him. He had never thought them before, yet they felt truer than anything he had said in his life. And maybe you felt this too, even for a moment. When the chatter of your mind pauses, when silence opens, something peaceful rises. It's not the silence of nothingness, it's the silence of freedom. Pause with me here. Inhale deeply, let the breath rise. Then exhale slowly. As you breathe, imagine your thoughts falling away, one by one, until only space remains. Notice how the body feels when the mind is no longer crowded. Notice how peace emerges when nothing presses for your attention. The boy leaned back, eyes closed now, and allowed himself to sit fully in that emptiness. For once, he did not wish for gold or silver or copper. He did not even wish to undo his mistakes. He simply sat, breathing, feeling the soft earth beneath him, the cool air on his skin, the steady rhythm of life moving through him. In that emptiness, he discovered something extraordinary: clarity. He could see the path of his choices without anger, without excuses, without shame. He had failed, yes. But the failure no longer defined him. It was only a story, one among many, drifting through his mind like any other thought. And like any thought, he could let it pass. This realization loosened something in him that had been tight for years. The loneliness he had carried since childhood, the hunger for more, the restless chasing. All of it quieted in the empty space of his mind. For the first time, he felt whole without needing anything. He smiled faintly, a smile small but real. "I do not need gold to be free," he whispered. "I only need an empty mind and a clear heart." And perhaps that is the lesson waiting for you as well. The world will always offer copper, silver, gold, things to chase, things to desire. But if your mind is full of them, you will always feel heavy. Only when you empty the mind do you discover the lightness already within you. Pause once more. Inhale, hold gently, then exhale. With that breath, imagine emptying your mind. Picture it as a room, and with each exhale, you open a window, letting clutter drift away. What remains is space. What remains is freedom. The boy opened his eyes and gazed at the stars. They looked brighter now, sharper, as if the emptiness inside him had cleared the fog between his eyes and the sky. He felt no crown on his head, no wealth in his hands, but he felt something greater: peace. And peace, he realized, was the treasure he had been chasing all along, without knowing its name. The valley was silent, the night deep, but his heart was light. He rested there, not clinging to thoughts, not pushing them away, simply letting them come and go. In the emptiness, he found presence. In the emptiness, he found himself. But the night had not finished teaching. For soon he would learn that emptiness is not weakness, but strength. And that true strength is not in muscle or wealth, but in the quiet power of one who can master his own mind. The silent strength. The boy sat with his back against the earth, the sky wide above him, his thoughts drifting like clouds. The bundles were gone, the rusted coins scattered, yet in their absence he felt something he had never known before. Strength. Not the strength of muscles or endurance, not the strength of speed or wealth, but a quiet strength born from stillness. He whispered into the night, "I carried copper, silver, and gold, but the heaviest burden was my mind. And now, sitting here, lighter than I have ever been, I see the truth. Strength is not in the body, but in the silence of the heart." Valley did not answer, yet he felt it listening. Every tree, every stone, every shadow seemed to echo his words, and in that silence, he felt steady, like the mountain itself, unmoved by storms. He remembered the way greed had carried him down the slope, faster than his body should have been able to move. That had felt like power, but it was not. It was desperation dressed as speed. True strength was different. True strength was the ability to sit still while temptation roared, to breathe while regret screamed, to choose calm when the world shouted chaos. And maybe you felt this too. The difference between the noisy strength that burns out quickly and the silent strength that stays steady no matter what. The noisy kind feeds on adrenaline, on craving, on anger. The silent kind feeds on clarity, on patience, on peace. One collapses, the other endures. Pause with me here. Inhale deeply, let the breath rise in your chest, then exhale slowly. As you breathe, notice the strength that comes not from tension, but from release, not from pushing harder, but from letting go. That is the silent strength waiting in you too. The boy closed his eyes, letting the night breeze brush across his face. He realized that silence was not emptiness. It was a reservoir, a deep well of power that could not be stolen, could not be lost, because it did not depend on the world. The fakir, the king, had wanted an heir strong enough to carry more than metal. He had wanted someone who could carry the weight of a kingdom without being crushed by greed or fear. The boy's chest ached with the sting of failure. He had not been that man, not yet. But perhaps, in this silence, he could begin to become him. Perhaps the crown he lost was not the only path to strength. Perhaps the greater crown was one no hand could place on his head, only his own discipline could shape. He pressed his palm against the ground, feeling the steady earth beneath him. "Strength is not in what I can lift," he murmured, "but in what I can release. Strength is not in holding on, but in letting go." The rusted coins gleamed faintly in the dirt. He no longer saw them as treasure lost. He saw them as proof of what had tested him, broken him, and taught him. They were his teachers, silent and unyielding, and in their silence he found his own. And perhaps you can sense it now, too, that your strength is not only in the battles you fight, but in the battles you refuse to feed. Not in the noise of victory, but in the quiet of discipline. Not in conquering others, but in mastering yourself. Pause once more. Inhale slowly, hold gently, exhale. As you breathe, imagine drawing strength not from force, but from silence. Notice how steady it feels, how unshakable, how lasting. The boy lifted his head to the stars. For the first time, he did not envy their distance, their glow. He felt part of them, steady and quiet in the same vastness. He had discovered a strength that no bundle of coins, no crown, no kingdom could give him. The strength of silence, the strength of a mind no longer ruled by its own storms. The night deepened, the valley hushed, but his heart was awake, steady and still. He had tasted silent strength, and he knew it was real. Yet he also knew that strength must be practiced, tended like a garden, carried into each moment of life. And soon he would see that this strength was not a gift to keep hidden, but a discipline to live with every day. Everyday practice. The boy remained seated in the valley, his back still sore, his hands still raw. Yet something inside him had shifted. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt alive, steady, and strong. But as he breathed with the night, he realized something important. A single moment of strength would not save him. One night of clarity was not enough. If he wished to live differently, he would need to practice every day. He whispered to himself, strength must be carried daily. Like breath. Like walking. He thought of the path he had taken with the fakir, the road, the river, the mountain. Each step had been practice, though he had not seen it at the time. The burdens he carried were not curses, but teachers. Every load, every ache, every temptation had been preparing him for this truth. The mind must be trained daily, just as the body is trained by walking, climbing, and enduring. The boy closed his eyes and imagined his mornings to come. He would wake, sit in silence, and watch his thoughts as they rose, naming them one by one, letting them pass. He would ask himself before each choice, "Why am I doing this?" He would pause before speaking, pause before acting, pause before running down another slope of greed. And maybe you can see this too. Wisdom is not born in one moment. It is practiced like a craft. Just as a musician trains with scales, just as an athlete repeats the same movements until they are second nature, the mind must be trained by small daily acts of awareness. Pause here with me. Inhale deeply, hold it softly, then exhale. As you breathe, think of one practice you could carry into tomorrow. Perhaps pausing before a decision, perhaps watching one thought without reacting, perhaps breathing once before you speak. Imagine yourself doing it, small but steady. That is how strength grows. One quiet act repeated. The boy smiled faintly, though his face was still lined with sorrow. "I failed a king," he murmured, "but perhaps I can still honor myself. If I practice, if I train my mind, I may not wear a crown, but I can live with peace." He realized now that peace was not given by others. It was not in copper, silver, or gold. It was not in a letter or a crown. It was in the discipline of his own thoughts, the habit of right intention, the daily tending of seeds. He leaned forward, pressing his palms into the dirt, grounding himself. "Every day," he whispered, "I will practice every day." And perhaps you can whisper that to yourself as well, not as a heavy promise, not as a burden, but as a gentle rhythm. Every day, breathe. Every day, notice. Every day, choose. That is how peace becomes not a dream, but a way of living. The valley remained silent, but the boy felt no loneliness now. He felt accompanied by the stars, by the earth, by the breath moving in and out of him. Each breath was a teacher. Each breath was practice. He stayed there long into the night, breathing, watching, letting the emptiness teach him, and as dawn began to hint at the edge of the sky, he realized something more. Practice was not only for himself, practice was also for others. The calm he cultivated would ripple outward, touching those he met, shaping the world around him. The boy exhaled slowly, his heart steadier than before. The night had stripped him of everything, but it had also given him a path of everyday practice, of choosing peace over greed, clarity over confusion. He was no king, but he was no longer the servant of his own restless thoughts. The valley glowed faintly with the coming dawn. And with that light, another thought rose in him. Perhaps this story was not only his. Perhaps others needed to hear it, to reflect on their own burdens, their own intentions, their own daily practice. The boy sat in the valley as the first hints of dawn painted the horizon. The sky, once black and endless, softened into blue and gray, and the stars began to fade. His body still ached, his hands still bore the stains of rust, but his heart carried something new, a sense of calm he had never known. He had learned the danger of greed, the weight of thoughts, the power of intention, and the gift of silence. But as he breathed with the morning air, he realized that the lesson was not meant to stay only within him. It had to be shared, reflected, spoken aloud. For wisdom left unspoken is like a seed left unplanted, it withers in the dark. He pressed his palms together, whispering, "I must carry these truths forward. Not the coins, not the crown, but the clarity I found in their place." And maybe, as you listen now, you feel the same stirring in your chest. This story is not only about a boy and a king in disguise. It is about you and the burdens you carry, the thoughts you feed, the choices you make. The valley is not far away. It is here, within you, in the quiet space of your own mind. So let me pause here and invite you into reflection. Think of one moment in your life when temptation whispered louder than honesty. Think of one time you chose desire over truth. It may sting. It always does. But notice what it taught you. Notice how regret shaped you, how it pointed you towards something truer. If a part of this story has spoken to you, share it. Write in the comments the lesson that touched you most, or the thought you want to carry into tomorrow. When you reflect aloud, you not only strengthen the lesson for yourself, you give it to others too. And someone else, perhaps listening in their own night, might read your words and feel less alone. Pause with me once more. Inhale deeply, let the air fill your chest, then exhale slowly. As you breathe, imagine offering your reflection to the world, like a lantern set afloat on water. Small, gentle, but shining. The boy looked again at the letter lying beside him. The words of the king no longer crushed him. Instead, they guided him, reminding him that honesty and intention are treasures no thief can steal. He whispered, "I cannot change what I lost, but I can honor what I've learned." And perhaps that is your lesson tonight too. We cannot undo our choices, but we can plant new ones. We cannot erase our regrets, but we can let them awaken us. And we cannot always keep our thoughts from arising, but we can choose which ones we water. So if you are listening now, take a moment to reflect. Comment below what spoke to you most. The image, the lesson, or the reminder you want to carry into your own life. This practice of reflection is itself a form of mindfulness. It is not just a story you've heard. It is a seed you can plant. The boy sat quietly, the sky growing brighter above him. He was no king, but in the silence of his heart, he felt the quiet dignity of someone who had seen himself clearly. The rusted coins lay forgotten in the dirt, but the lessons they carried gleamed brighter than gold. And as the dawn rose, one more truth arrived. This story was nearing its end, but the journey of the heart never ends. Soon the boy would rise from the valley with nothing in his hands, but everything in his breath. He had reflected, he had learned, and now he would walk forward with strength born not from power, but from peace closing whisper. The boy rose slowly from the earth as the first warmth of sunrise touched the valley. His body was stiff, his muscles sore, but he stood upright, more balanced than he had been in many years. Around him the broken bundles and rusted coins lay scattered, no longer symbols of failure, but silent teachers. They had carried him into greed, yes, but they had also carried him into awakening. He breathed deeply, the cool air filling his chest, and with that breath came a quiet promise. He would walk differently now. He would not chase wealth, he would not run from burdens, and he would not be tricked by the restless whispers of his own mind. He would practice honesty, he would practice intention, he would practice silence. Every day. The letter from the king still rested against his heart. Its words no longer stung. They steadied him, reminding him that even though he had failed the test, he had not lost the lesson. The crown was gone, but peace remained, and perhaps that was the greater treasure. And maybe this is the treasure waiting for you too. Not in copper, silver, or gold, but in the calm that comes when you breathe deeply. When you let go of thoughts that no longer serve you, when you choose honesty over excuses. Pause with me here. Inhale slowly, let the breath rise in your chest, then exhale gently. As you breathe, imagine setting down one burden you've been carrying, maybe a regret, maybe a fear, maybe a desire. Place it gently on the ground beside you and feel how light your body becomes. The boy began to walk, each step steady, not hurried. The road ahead was long, but he no longer feared it. He no longer longed for shortcuts or treasures waiting at the end. The road itself was enough. His practice would be in the walking. His peace would be in the breathing. The valley faded behind him. The mountain stood tall in the distance, and the world opened wide before his eyes. For the first time, he felt no need to escape his life. He felt ready to live it. And now, as this story comes to its close, I turn the reflection back to you. What seed will you plant after hearing this tale? What intention will guide you tomorrow? Share it in the comments. Your words may become the lantern someone else needs in their night. And if you've found peace in this journey tonight, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and tap the bell so that the next story will find you when you need it most. These tales are not just for listening, they are for practicing, for living, for carrying into the quiet corners of your own days. Pause once more with me. Inhale deeply, hold it softly, then exhale slowly. Feel the body loosen, feel the mind settle, feel the heart rest. Let the breath guide you toward sleep, light and unburdened. The boy's footsteps faded into the morning, steady and sure. His story lingers not in the crown he lost, but in the wisdom he gained. And as you drift now, may your thoughts soften, may your burdens lighten, and may your dreams carry you gently into peace. This is where we end tonight's journey. Tomorrow brings another story, another lesson, another chance to practice. Until then, may your sleep be deep, may your mind be clear, and may your heart be at ease. End of script. Sweet dreams.